Beware Romulans bearing gifts.
Hi, this is Eric.
This is Carl.
And this is Sean.
And welcome back to Romulans Bearing Gifts. This is episode 71. And we are back. And we're now on the downslide of the hill, passing the hump of mid-season, season 2 of Strange New Worlds. And that brings us to Lost in Translation.
Your whole setup had me concerned. I don't know what to go with the downslope. I don't know what to do with all of that.
Yeah, does that mean it's getting worse? But I think you mean, okay, we're over the hump. We're almost done with the series. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yes, and I was thinking of Over the Hill as well. Yeah, except coming down the other side.
All righty, great,
great. I'm going to make a note to myself. There we go.
Yes. If you contribute to our Patreon, you can get the annotated version of the podcast with footnotes and everything included.
You don't want all of this. I'm telling you now.
So a little bit of change in pace, because obviously last week before this, we had the episode Charades, where, Spock turns human and antics ensued. So a little bit more grounded in Lost in Translation. I was hoping Bill Murray would make an appearance.
God.
I mean, I knew Scarlett Johansson probably wouldn't show up, but
there we go.
No, but honestly, I was wondering if there'd be any similarities in terms of not plot of the movie Lost in Translation, but theme, like thematic, like maybe someone feeling lost or something, something like that, or feeling detached.
Chapel and Spock go on a trip to some other planet. He likes it. She feels alienated. And she meets some other guy named Gene Roddenberry, and they fall in love. But they never meet again. I don't know, something like that.
Could have been interesting. But no, that's not really what it's about at all. We have a setup where the Enterprise, the Farragut, there's actually some other starships that aren't mentioned at all, but if you pay attention with your magnifying glass, you can see them in a certain scene. So there's actually several ships there at this. It's not a refinery per se. It's more like a collector.
It's a collector and refinery. It is a refinery.
Of oh my god, well yeah, it does both, but oh my god, I didn't write this down. The substance that they're collecting there, deuterium. Oh yes, of course, it's deuterium, which is actually the fuel of starships, not necessarily dilithium crystals, but deuterium. And it's been a long delayed opening for this absolutely humongous station receptacle thing, and the Enterprise is assisting in getting it online because this is a really important. It's like a strategic location where it is. It could be the sending off point for future long distance space exploration because it's sort of on the edge of Federation territory, so it could be like a refueling type location. It also is near Gorn space, which I thought was going to play a lot more.
Me too. When I heard that, I was like, "Oh, cool!" Because that's the green dinosaur guy that Kirk fights in the original series, right?
Absolutely, yes. And I don't know if you have delved into season 1 yet, Sean, but they are one of our primary protagonists in season 1.
Oh, cool. Okay.
I'm sorry, antagonists, not protagonists. Antagonists.
Well, okay. Interesting. All right.
So yes, the Gorn are back.
but not in this episode.
Sadly, no.
No, but I thought it was going to play more into the plot, not necessarily with them showing up, but maybe I'll explain a little bit more later. Let's see. Any initial thoughts on this episode?
Yeah. And you know what? From my viewpoint coming in on this, I was like, yay, more Uhura episodes. Because, there's a lot with these shows where one episode will be centered on one character or even a pair of characters. Like last episode was obviously about Spock. Spock's hardly in this one, but we have Uhura up front. I love it when shows do that. And they do this in all the Star Treks a lot. Every character will be in there, but one of them will be like
most of the Star Treks.
Okay, most of the Star Treks. But I was glad that we finally got a story about her. Not that the entire story is about her, although I'm willing to bet there has been one before, at least in this season.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, because so it's kind of like I'm like, okay, I don't know how to. I thought of this while you were talking, Eric. Is that this is a Wes Anderson episode, and that although there is a main plot going on, and that's Uhura's plot, there's little things peppered here and throughout that are kind of quirky and cute, like the conversation between Carol Kane and Number One. She's Number One, right?
Yes, she is.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a great conversation. I'm like, well, I want to see more with these characters because that's going to be interesting. We didn't get any more because of time. It's okay. Or her comment, he was one of my best students. Oh, wait. Yeah, well, he was one of my students, but he was just okay. I just said that because he's dead. I thought that was a really great line. Getting away from Carol Kane and that subplot. Oh, I thought this was going to be a full-on horror episode in the beginning because that undead, what do you call that creature? That alien. I know he's in the original series. I recognize the...
the Andorian.
Andorian. That undead Andorian looked pretty freaky in the lift. And I thought, well, wow, maybe this will be not a full-fledged zombie episode, but if they've ever had that. But what if this was like some sort of horror element and they're going to stick it in? And yeah, I kind of figured chances are no. What else? Oh, yeah, we have Kirk, which was new to me. I'm like, wait, is that James T. Kirk? And the only reason I knew it was him was they called him something else, and it went over my head. And then when he meets his brother, then I realized, oh, that's Captain Kirk. This guy's been on the show before, hasn't he? I'm not talking to William Shatner. I'm talking about last season.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. That actor was great. I liked that character. I liked him. And then there's the scene that I'm sure everybody was waiting for, and that's Uhura, Spock, and Kirk sit down to have drinks, which they totally didn't overdo, and I really appreciated it. I can't help it. And it sort of felt like a Christmas special there for a second, and it ended on such a sweet note. And well, okay, that's enough death and destruction. Let's celebrate Christmas. That's what it felt like to me anyway. And that's all I have for the moment, so I'll rest.
Well, that's a lot to unpack. I mean, okay.
But maybe you see if there's any more soda in this can.
I think, well, actually, fandom, who's like really plugged into Strange New Worlds like I am, a lot of people expected this to be a horror episode as well, and were quite disappointed.
Wait. A quick question is Uhura?
All right. Wait a second. First of all, Eric was saying they thought this was going to be a horror episode. The proper pronunciation is Uhura. So let's just get that clear early on, please. So you see how this is madcap?
I was confused at first. I was like, who's on first?
Yeah, no, I saw where this was going. So yes, a horror episode is what Eric said. Uhura is the woman's name. Please proceed.
Uhura.
Uhura.
Okay.
Yeah, a fandom thought this was going to be a horror episode, and many were quite disappointed. And you mentioned the Andorian. The Andorian, I don't know if you connected it, Sean, or it was that was Hammer, or
a very prominent character from the first season.
And the Hammer that Pelia was talking about, the guy who died last season, spoilers. So that's who Pelia was talking about. But obviously it wasn't Hammer. And there was also rumors that fans knew about that Bruce, is it Horak, who plays Hammer? Mm-hmm. They heard that he was going to reappear. And so they were hoping for something more substantial than just the zombie Hammer. And then, of course, there's the little recordings that Uhura has saved.
I'm going to ask you something, Eric, and either one of you can answer this, but the way that you're talking about fandom, it sounds like they feed fandom a little bit of each episode, and then the fans go crazy, and all kinds of conspiracy theories float around Twitter and Facebook, and what do they do now?
Your summation is close.
Okay.
The part I want to edit is, it's not that they just throw out some breadcrumbs. They chuck full French loaves of bread out there, which is really annoying.
Like, I Love Lucy size breads.
Yes, it's really annoying. They give up way too much to try to pre-promote, kind of like how the BBC has done in recent years with Doctor Who. It's super annoying. And then you are correct. Fans take those loaves of bread and they go nuts in all different directions. And depending on what the factoid or tease is, a lot of infighting and debate before the episode even airs.
Yes. So they sound worse than Whovians.
Yes. Obviously I was more plugged into Doctor Who fandom, especially, during the so-called Moffat era, etc. And then I kind of fell off it because, Doctor Who went a different direction, whatever. And so when I was more plugged into Doctor Who, Star Trek TV-wise was basically dead. There wasn't that conversation. But now things have shifted, and especially I feel like with Strange New Worlds, because I'm not even going to bring up Discovery, because that was just a toxic in every possible way as far as fandom was concerned. So,
oh dear,
that was ground zero.
Because I actually thought, based on comments that you sent to us over the Facebook, I think, is that fans were already up in arms about the musical episode.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm like, okay, that must be lost in translation. The one that Inside Baseball, accidentally skipped, and we're recording out of order now. And then I'm like, okay, it's not that one. Okay, it's not this Klingon. And I'm starting to realize, wait a minute, how did they even know there was a music? Why can't they keep that sort of thing under wraps? They have to be like, oh, we're going to have one like Buffy did. We're going to have one like Psych did. I'm sorry, maybe that's a topic for that episode. It just surprised me that, somebody knew that soon in advance.
Paramount alluded to this musical episode, I think just after the premiere of this season, just after the first episode of this season came out, they were already dropping hints and etc.
I have to think about that. I don't know.
I don't like it, but I'm sure we'll talk about that more when we get to
Well, it's to whet people's appetite, and I'm sure the people who thought the one we're talking about now was Lost in Translation was a horror episode. Is that because they showed the undead Andorian?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
That is why.
Well, that's horrible.
And again, they were expecting a lot more out of the actor, the one who plays Hammer, who we mostly just saw in those little those screen recordings that Uhura had. Let's see. Oh my gosh! Now you made me forget all the other stuff you brought up.
I don't even know her name. Well, it's Carol Kane, but I don't know the.
Oh yeah, Pelia. Thank goodness, finally, because obviously she was introduced in the premiere of the season, and this is kind of the most substantial we've had of her yet. And it's already, episode 6. There was a little bit in Tomorrow, but it was almost like she had a cameo in that episode. So I'm glad we're finally getting more of her, and I absolutely love it. Her dynamic. Now, I love her being her. Not 100% sure how I feel about how Una was in those interactions, because she in universe she's considered like the best current number one, like in all of Starfleet, and the way Pelia shook her and rattled her and put her off her game and made Una, not be her normally composed self, kind of reflects weird to me on Una. And I understand there was the bit about the Hemmer stuff that was on her mind, but I don't know. I'm still thinking about that. And you mentioned Kirk, and even though Kirk did appear sort of in season 1, this episode is actually our first proper seeing quote unquote prime Kirk in this show.
Okay.
He appeared like 3 times before this, but because of space timey-wimey reasons, it wasn't necessarily him. This is our first time really getting a dose of real James T. Kirk as he pertains to Strange New Worlds.
Okay. And the meeting of the 3 at the end in the bar, and it feels like Christmas.
I totally agree. Like, I love that it was there. It was a significant moment because it was the 3 of them, but especially Kirk and Spock really meeting for the first time. And it wasn't overdone, and it wasn't like, fireworks went off. And I just thought it was done really, really well.
All right. No further questions, Your Honor. I'll pass the witness.
That's all very interesting.
Okay, let me say some more of my actual thoughts about the episode, and I feel like it'll probably set Carl up, as we do this a lot, where I just toss it in the air and then Carl hits it out of the ballpark. So this episode, something else I like about it overall, this one really feels like and this is going to sound like a backhanded compliment, but it really feels like I don't want to say generic, but it is so in the Star Trek template for an episode. The main issue of what's going on with the station and what's going on with Uhura. Because she was hallucinating, and then we meet another side character who's hallucinating later in the episode. Just having a cast or crew member hallucinating like that and not being able to separate reality from fiction, for some reason that felt very TNG to me. Just in general, it just seemed like, oh man, this could just be any old TNG episode.
Yes.
And because as I mentioned earlier, they mentioned the detail of this being near Gorn space, I thought the Gorn were going to be an unseen antagonist. And because Uhura was having these situations, and then later crewman Ramon, I thought that the explanation was going to be that the Gorn had some type of sonic weapon or something that travels on weird frequencies. And I thought it was going to be that the Gorn were somehow like disrupting the crew from afar. And I felt fairly convinced that's what it was going to be. And then, of course, that didn't go anywhere because it didn't really have anything to do with the Gorn. So I was kind of like, oh, crap. And then another Star Trek trope is that there's an alien alien species, maybe not even corporeal, maybe not even, something you can see, but that they're trying to communicate with the crew and trying to explain what's going on. And again, this is right out of Star Trek tropes, which is fine. And I enjoyed all of that. And once Uhura kind of put it all together, that's where it felt like a little, okay, I like how this is ending up, but she kind of wrapped it up too quickly for me at the end of solving the situation. It was weird how all her hallucinations perfectly lined up. Like there were these perfect clues that were too neat. And then when she tells Pike, we need to shut down the station. Well, we can't. Well, then we got to blow it up. Again, Pike, he's very trustworthy of his people. I mean, for being the captain, he really kind of like sort of like not relinquishes his command, but defers to others quite a lot. And we've already seen times in previous episodes where it's like, oh, it's awesome he took that chance. But now I feel like he almost might be gilding the lily. Now, this worked out fine in this situation, but I feel like this could be to Pike's detriment down the road, that he's extremely trusting and doesn't challenge too much like advice that others give. But I got a little bit more to say, but I think it's a good chunk right there for Carl to chew on.
Okay. Well, I definitely wanted to hear you guys' opinion of the episode. Someone who's a veteran of Trek, someone who's new, to get a feel for what they thought of this one. This was not my favorite episode. There are some issues. And I'll back out and I'll say a couple of things. First of all, out of all of the Strange New World episodes, this one feels the most Kurtzman. And I'm going to explain what I mean by that. It is not supposed to be an outward insult, but one of my biggest issues, particularly with Discovery, in Kurtzman's take on it, is that pain has to be the motivation behind everything. There's got to be some pain there, and you hang that, the pain is the core, and then you hang the story around that pain. And we got a lot of pain in this episode. We've got issues with Uhura missing Himmer. We've got issues pain between the brothers and the legacy. We got issues with Una and missing Himmer and the stress of Pelia. In many different directions, there is a lot of pain. And so, again, with my biggest criticism about Discovery as a series is they use that pain, and again, to tell a good story, there's nothing wrong with having pain as being your motivator. But if you're going to take the audience through these emotional, roller coasters of back and forth and up and down, there needs to be something around it that gives us a little something more. And there are moments of that. I mean, I'll tell you right now, I actually really liked the dialogue between Una and Pelia. I thought that was funny. I was dying with the crumbs. So so there were these moments that I liked here. But again, pain as the motivation. Okay, so if we're gonna do this, you got to make it worthwhile. There's got to be something redeeming about it, or there's got to be something big about this. Here's another big issue. Now, we know that, Uhura goes on to be an important character in the original series. And particularly through Strange New Worlds, we have an expectation of greatness from her. We note that she has not had a great opportunity to really show us who she was in the original series. And so for her to be one of the tentpole characters here in Strange New Worlds, we are looking to see Uhura stretch her wings and demonstrate what it was that made her such a valuable crew member, made her so important to get her that position on, an original series. So we want to see Uhura's badassery moment. We want to see that. We have seen a couple of episodes with her so far, and things have happened, and she's had a moment or two here, but in my opinion, nothing that really solidifies her as the person that we know Uhura is going to be in the future. I keep waiting for it. Sean was asking, I'm assuming, she's done something before. She's had other episodes before. Got to go back and watch season 1. She does have a couple of other episodes, but each time, and Eric, once again, you touched on it. The resolution or her contribution in those episodes always seems a little too convenient or a little too fabricated. All right, so let me back out. One more thing. Again, my biggest issue with Kurtzman-style episodes is not just the pain, but exposition is a problem for me. Strange New Worlds has been very novel in that throughout the series, and this is contrasting to say, Discovery, or maybe even some of the other, more modern Star Trek series, Strange New Worlds has done a great job of setting up scenarios and letting the characters react in the scenario. They're responding to stuff that's happening to them. And I keep saying this, and I keep harping on this, that, it feels consistent. I keep, it feels consistent. So, this is unbelievable. And I was complimenting them all throughout the series because stuff makes sense. And when you create a space where stuff makes sense, you've laid a foundation that characters and emotion and all kinds of stuff can sprout from it, and you feel at rest. You're like, okay, the foundation is there. Now I can see why the characters are behaving the way they are. Now I can see what's going on. Okay, well, if we look at what they did in this episode, there is a lot of exposition. No, and let me be very specific. What I will call emotional exposition is going. Now, again, this is one of my biggest beefs with Discovery. Strange New Worlds has done an excellent job of not doing that up until this episode. So, what do I mean when I say emotional exposition? Traditionally with Strange New Worlds, one of the things that I have loved about it is that if a character is acting in an emotional way, if something important is happening with the characters, a scenario has created itself so that we see the character expressing it. It makes sense within the environment why the character would behave that way. We can relate to the characters, and we can feel that emotional connection because it's grounded in what's going on in the situation makes sense. Excellent. They've done a fantastic job of that in Strange New Worlds. It's one of the things that shocked me about why it was so dramatically different than what they were doing with Discovery. This episode, they get back to that, and I find that problematic. Where, again, there are these moments of what I'll say is supposed to be emotional impact in this particular episode. But each time, they do not create the environment that allows for the emotion to happen. They end up talking about it or explaining why it should be emotional, and then we are experiencing it through them saying it. And it happens a bunch of times in this episode. A bunch of times it happens. I mean, we learn about Uhura's loss of her family. Well, we knew about that before, but she talks about how the loss of her family in the shuttlecraft episode was so impactful and was a big deal to her. And then there's this. She spends all of this time telling Kirk about why that is significant. And then we get this 3-second flash of when she's stepping into the shuttlecraft that's supposed to be a flashback. The emotional impact was earlier. We missed that opportunity. Another one. She's talking to Kirk again. And there is this incredible opportunity. When she's sitting there and talking to Kirk, and she is talking about how stressed she is about what's going on. And in particular, she talks about how, as being a part of Starfleet, she can't imagine, or she's having trouble with the concept of death. That she doesn't like the idea of losing crew members, and that death is a part of what serving on board Starfleet is about. Now, any true fan of Star Trek, particularly original series, particularly of Kirk, knows that he's got this crazy obsession with cheating death and bending every conceivable rule to ensure that that does not happen. They spend multiple episodes and a movie describing Kirk's, I'm not going to say fear, but his issue with not being able to confront death and doing anything possible. It's at the heart of all his law breaking and everything that makes him such a unique character, is at the heart of who he has been throughout the entire series. So to have this moment, this tender moment where we are having Uhura meet Kirk, they're sitting down together, he's trying to give her a cookie, and she turns to him and she says that being a part of Starfleet, one of my greatest challenges, I can't figure out how to confront death. I don't know how to deal with this. And Kirk's like, just defeat it. That was some bullshit. I mean, that, if you wanted a moment of emotional impact that would have resonated and would have tied the modern series in with the original series and would have been a true moment where we could see some bonding between Uhura and Kirk in a very visceral way, seeing as they just met each other, bam, yet another opportunity that they just let it go. They just let it go. there are many moments in this, and I mean, even Himmer. Now, I really liked Himmer. Sean, you haven't gotten a chance to really know him. You got to go back and watch him from the previous season. He was a very important character early on in Strange New Worlds. And I thought, truly, of all of the characters that we met in Strange New Worlds, that he, right out of the box, was one of the most interesting and had a lot to say. The fact that we lost him in the first season bothered me to no end. That is a problem. And so, of course, they were hinting that he might be back and all that. I wasn't getting tied up in the fact that he might, pop out of the transporter or something like that. I wasn't tied to anything like that. I was very happy to see him again. But again, because he was such an important character, because his departure was so emotional, if you're going to bring him back, it's got to have some true emotional resonance, because we love this character and he had a heroic farewell. And so to bring him back in this episode and only use him, as this sort of zombie kind of thing, to me, again, it cheapened our experience with his great character, underutilized him in this episode. If you're going to do that, once again, give me something that makes sense out of why, he is this, we brought him back and you're taking us back through this emotional place. I don't think that his appearance in this episode and the emotions that he was supposed to have sparked up matched or were relevant to what actually happened in the characters in these episodes. It seemed small. And so, again, like I said, so if you go throughout this episode, you go throughout this episode, there are all of these supposed emotional touchstones that we're supposed to be connecting with. And each time they feel cheated, they feel short, they feel smaller than they really could have been if this is truly supposed to be an emotional episode. I just felt cheated time after time with each scene that was supposed to have been very emotional. And so I don't know if that is writing. I don't know if they were being rushed. I don't know what it was. But historically, with Strange New Worlds, one of the things that I have loved about it is they have created natural ways of bringing up emotion, bringing up tension, bringing up stuff. And this episode just felt structured. It felt very, and I'm not saying formulaic, it just felt like everything was heavily pointing to certain steps that need to occur. Now I'm gonna get into some other stuff, but that's my baseline here. I had issues because I assume this was supposed to have been an emotional episode, but historically, Strange New Worlds has done a better job of allowing the characters and the situations to create that sensation. And all throughout this episode, they were telling us what we were supposed to be feeling and not allowing it to come from the story. And that's a problem.
Well, Sean, welcome to the Carl Show. This is why I actually love doing this podcast a lot of all the podcasts I'm involved with. Because to me, the experience when Carl's on the panel, it's like going to one of those like lectures in college where there's some speaker who has something interesting to say. Except I get to hog the Q&A mic like the whole session. So I get to like directly interact with the speaker the whole time. This is why I love doing this. I'll just say before I give Sean a chance to chime in on that soliloquy, I kind of agree with everything Carl said. I don't think he's wrong at all. I rarely think Carl is wrong about anything pertaining to whatever we're watching. But however, that being said, while I do agree, I guess because I like all these characters so much on this show, or the primaries, that even though everything Carl said was true, the emotional parts that were supposed to hit still somewhat hit with me. So when Uhura had like her culmination at some point later in the episode, the one where she cried the most, like I felt it but it was because of the emotional. It was because of the emotional deposits that were made in season 1 with Hemmer, that it wasn't necessarily this episode itself, but just the callback of it was enough for me to go, oh man, I really miss that guy. He was so cool. And even though he only had kind of these cameos in her little vid logs, and you don't know this, Sean, but like the way he appeared in those vid logs, like very casual, that's not the way Hemmer usually was in the actual series. So you were kind of seeing like a different side of him that we didn't really see that much, like a more playful side. And I did kind of like, even though it was Star Trek formulaic, I did like the way she found the clue from his advice about resetting the whatever, and how Hemmer sort of like inadvertently helped to save the day from beyond the grave. And even though it was like all manufactured to get to that point, I guess I just kind of went along with it. So yeah.
I was afraid of, that's why I wanted to hear from you guys first, because I didn't want to appear, crotchety old cranky fan. I really wanted to hear, what folks had to say about, someone who's new to the series and even, new to the characters, and someone who's seen the show before. So I hear you. I'm just telling you how I felt, and I got some more stuff, but that is to me, that I found it distracting. I found that distracting. So I was trying to get on with it. I want to see Uhura excel and define who she is historically. So whenever I see that she's going to be in the episode, I get pretty excited. But I want to see it happen in a way that makes a lot of sense. And there's some craziness in this episode that is just like, why did they do that? Why did they do that? That kind of bothered me as we go throughout it. So, but again, maybe I'm just being a cranky old fan. I don't know.
I don't know how to respond to all this. I'm thinking of an example of what you were saying, Carl, and perhaps it was the scene where Uhura and Kirk are sitting down, and she's obviously very anxious about the fact that her mind is going away, and she won't have long to go until she becomes like what's his name that just died, but Ramon. Sorry, I knew he had a name. But are you talking about like a scene like that where she has to explain why she's upset before he says, "Do you want a cookie?"
Yes, there's a lot of exposition there.
Okay. And it's something that we actually just saw, so we don't need to be told it at the same time, as if there was a commercial break, we came in the middle.
Well, there are a couple of things about it. So one, we knew historically what was up with Uhura, and that she lost her family in that shuttlecraft accident. So we knew that from the previous series. So that's fine. She is introducing herself to Kirk. Now, she's using a lot of time here, and she's talking about stuff that we as fans who have seen the earlier episodes of Strange New World already know. We're assuming that she's telling Kirk this because this is the first time she's meeting Kirk. Right? Okay, that's fine. But we already know the stuff that she's talking about. This moment between she and Kirk, they could have used this for, like I said, more powerful, more interesting things than just rehashing the pain that she has had that we know about already. She's explaining to Kirk the pain that she has when we already know her pain. So as fans and people who've been watching the series, we already know this stuff about her. Don't spend all of this screen time spelling these emotions out to Kirk, when we already know this stuff about Uhura. And then, of course, the payoff as a result of that is not fantastic. So, I mean, that's just one example of where it's happening. But, okay, that is one of them. That is one.
Okay.
And like I said, that moment, the you want a cookie moment, that, the one I'm talking about where he's trying to give her the cookie.
Yeah, I thought that was funny.
Yeah, I thought it was funny too. But that moment, in that scene is the one where she tells him how much trouble she has with death. And I'm telling you, that was a huge missed opportunity, because the other thing is we are watching this magical moment, I say with the double air quotes, where Uhura and Kirk first meet. And again, you don't have to make it huge and you don't have to make it big. But if they don't have a lot of time, which they're, making it very clear that these are bottle episodes and they're trying to keep things moving, to show a connection between Uhura and Kirk about that particular issue, that would have been a shorthand way. That would have been a very big, reasonable connection between all of them early on. And it was just, if you want emotion, there you go. That's getting at the heart of both of their characters and building the history. But all right, so that's what. So I'm letting that go. I've said what I had to say about the emotional part of that. I just, again, there's a lot of pain in this episode, and they're trying to, reconcile that. Oh, incident.
Yeah. And I think you're right, Carl. I mean, the way you and I have talked about so-called Kurtzman trick quite a lot on this podcast before, and you are right. It's just I didn't really notice it until I listened to you, because it had the veneer of Strange New Worlds all wrapped around it. The Kurtzman emotional angst trick. Like I didn't. It was sufficiently camouflaged for me.
Yeah,
I didn't really notice it, but now you've brought it up, I believe you are correct. It's just it was nestled in such a way that it didn't pop its head out at me, because usually with Kurtzman trick it pops me in the face, like in case I'm asleep.
Here's my problem. Okay, so here's the the secondary part of that. I mean, I know that's kind of how they roll, with that series or whatnot. I actually I like Grey's Anatomy. I like stuff. I will watch an emotional show. That's not my beef. My issue is that the other stuff around it has got to make sufficient sense that if I've got this big emotional core, that the context is sufficiently interesting or makes enough sense that these things fit well together. They fit well together. All right. Now, if you look throughout this episode, there's a bunch of stuff that don't make no damn sense. All right. There's a bunch of stuff in this episode that makes no damn sense. And so if that wasn't there, if those things weren't there, I might have been sufficiently camouflaged regarding the emotional stuff. But you see, the veneer fell away from me because the stuff around it was like, why is this? Why are they doing? What's going on here? I mean, okay. I mean, you want to go through you want to go through some of this stuff?
Sure. Go ahead.
I mean, there's a scene where Uhura's acting weird early on, and this is after she has decked Kirk, which I thought was a funny start of their getting to know each other. That's all well and good, but as they are wandering through the halls, and Uhura's already displayed, let's just say, some interesting judgment. You want to give Uhura a phaser at the same time that she's having her episodes? Have her walk behind you as you're walking through, and she's got her phaser behind you having her episodes, but she can't even walk. I'm letting it. We got what's his name? Ramon? What's his Ramirez?
It's Saul Ramon.
Okay, we got Ramon in the warp nacelle engine room or whatever, fumbling around with the control panel. And of course, the only person that managed to find him, they got 9 people wandering around the deck. The only person that manages to find him is Uhura crawling up in the Jeffries tube to see him in there, right?
Yes.
She knows that he is acting erratically. She knows that he's got the same kind of hallucinatory visions that she is having.
At that point, she does?
Yes. Yes. Oh, yes. She knows. Okay. She knows. And so she sees him. She says, step away from the console. Step away from the console. She's got a phaser on the guy. All right. Now, in this moment, she knows how he's been reacting. I would think with the phaser on the guy, probably the simplest thing you could do is stun him. At this moment, you don't know what he's going to do. You know how he's been acting. He's been sabotaging ships left and right. you probably want to stun the guy at this point, right? But no, in this moment, Uhura feels the need to tell him that she's real, and she starts telling him about her family, what kind of cat she has. She goes through all of this kind of stuff. He is not buying it, turns away, goes back to the console. Kirk runs in there. He continues to fumble with the gun. Kirk wraps his arm around Uhura. 2 to emergency beam out, blows out the whole deck, loses Ramirez or Ramon or whatever's going on there. Okay. Now, I mean, there are some things. All right, why didn't Uhura stun him? Why is Uhura going into exposition about where she's from, what kind of cat she's had? There's plenty of other things. Kirk shows up. Why didn't you emergency beam him out too? You could have. There's so many things. And not just disposable crew member. Uhura's telling the family story. None of that made any sense. We lost crew. We lost engines. I'll let it go.
You're right about that scene. I felt some of those moments. I felt weirdly. I know Sean's going to say something. I felt weirdly that they were kind of going for like a weird moment, kind of like Interstellar with what happens to Matt Damon. That they wanted to somehow recreate that excitement of an unexpected hull breach. But let me piggyback a little bit more on, like, preceding that. There was something that bothered me a little bit before that happened, just before, which was once Ramon escapes from sickbay, which they should have had like a precautionary like brig shield around or whatever, but fine, let's let that go. But once Ramon escapes sickbay,
past the one red shirt security guy who could not.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah. Totally failed at his job. But once he gets out of sickbay and is on the run or on the loose, normally, on the Enterprise, there's a bunch of random crew milling around everywhere in the hallways, and conveniently at this moment, there's no one at all in the hallways, and there's just like a few personnel, security who are kind of canvassing the ship. And I tried to explain it in my head, like, maybe it's considered after hours on the ship because, they do an artificial day-night cycle, like if you're into Star Trek. And maybe it's the night cycle, so there's more people in bed. Or I thought maybe there's some protocol, which is if you're not involved in this, just like, go to your quarters.
Lockdown.
Yeah, lockdown, like in that way. But then I thought, that seems like a silly strategy because if you just had regular crew all about, and if they could access, let's say, phasers like from one of those utility hatches, in the I keep calling them hallways. What are they called? They're not called hallways in the Enterprise.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I guess they are.
Yeah, I just can't. No, there's another word for it. Like,
I thought you said it earlier. Jeffrey's tube.
Well, the Jeffrey's tube is the specific cylindrical one that's kind of angled.
The small ones for maintenance, not the hallways you're talking about.
But they're not called hallways. Anyway, but I thought, if there's more crew just about, they would have caught him so quickly, theoretically. And so, it really bothered me that of all the people who did find him first, of course it was Uhura. And I didn't like how, considering what Uhura had been going through, I didn't like how Kirk would separate from her. Like, because of how she's been hallucinating, I feel like you got to stay a team.
Yeah, well,
and just work it that way. And so, that I found, plot convenience, all of that. And then leading into what you said.
As evidenced by every episode of Scooby-Doo. Let's split up. No, don't split up.
And you're absolutely right. Like, why did he only beam the 2 of them and not the 3 of them? And then we wouldn't have had the janky CGI scene when Ramon gets thrust into space. It was only a little bit janky. But that crewman's death is on Uhura's hands, as you said, for not stunning him, because I was thinking the same thing. And, like, she should be remorseful over that situation.
Well, technically, it was the security guys. I'm not going to put a.
Oh yeah, well yeah, he made the first fault, but
but what you're both saying makes perfect sense. But I would never have thought that because, like, I never think about killer stun. I didn't even think about the fact that she had a blaster on her because she's the communications officer. But I do agree. I'm probably going to rate this higher than both of you, but that, Carl, is how you said how it, that's part of the conversation here is hearing, a big old veteran and a big old noob, and then Eric is in the middle, and I don't know what you would call that. But anyway, the scene where right after that, where Kirk, it's funny, I keep wanting to say William Shatner, where Kirk beams away with Uhura, and it's just like a split second before the explosion. I thought that was a bit cheap. And not only that, but I could have sworn that some of that explosion conveniently went around the beam that was beaming them out.
Well, I mean, we can say force shield containment and all kinds of stuff for that. But
okay, I guess.
Look,
but the way this episode that it did, I thought they would explain it a little bit afterwards.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, okay, all right, look. We see early in this episode is the first chance that Pike gets to be fleet captain?
Yes.
He's got the cool badge that lets everybody know that he's fleet commander. I mean, fleet captain and all that kind of stuff. Why does Spock not know? Why the hell would he say? I mean, there's a scene where everybody's on the bridge. He's got the big ass badge on, going fleet captain to everyone. He's in the middle of his speech, and then Spock goes, "Fleet captain, sir." What the hell? Of course he's fleet captain. How would Spock not know that? But all right, again, that was good. That was like 3 minutes in. I was like, 3 minutes in. But okay, so I'm trying to let it go.
True though, yeah.
And Sean or Carl, do you know why they added that inane detail to this episode of making Pike fleet captain?
Why?
Yeah, we don't. Neither one of us know.
Well, Carl might have, but I don't know. But he's not plugged into the crazy fandom like I am. So that was a little detail that was by design by the writers, because in an episode of TOS, it might be the Menagerie, but there's a throwaway line where Kirk mentions, like, when he first met Pike in person, that Pike was a fleet captain.
Oh, nice.
And so to keep it in line with TOS canon, they came up with this reason or excuse to make Pike a temporary fleet captain, so that when Kirk meets him for the first time, it all works, quote unquote.
So the fact that Spock says, "Fleet captain, sir," that's to ram it into fans. Pay attention to this.
Hey, it could. You never know. It could be an out of universe explanation because Spock. Yeah, he's like, wait a second, what's going on here? Oh, this is for canon. Oh, I got it. He didn't get the memo.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, the official term for hallways in Star Trek or on the Enterprise is corridors.
Oh, that's right.
There you go.
Hallway, I knew it sounded wrong, and I was like, what's going on here? It's corridor.
So right, corridor. How I missed that one. Yes.
So what did you guys think of the final scene where the three of them meet? Nobody really answered that question.
Oh, I did a little bit, but I'll let Carl talk.
I thought it was a little quiet. I would have preferred perhaps a little more fanfare about that moment. But it felt like this episode was setting up a lot of things. And, Eric, you pointed out the fleet captain canon issue, certainly the chance where all the crew gets to meet each other for the first time. It feels kind of like certain check boxes were being made for this episode. And so it did have that, hallmark Christmas moment where we're panning gently out of the bar and we see them all together. I could have used just a bit more fanfare for that moment, but it was okay.
Well, at least they met, because if they didn't have Spock meet Kirk, there would be explosions everywhere. Like, how could they do that? They're on the same They're on the same ship for the first time together. Why can't they have them meet?
Yeah, and the circumstances I thought was pretty hilarious that Spock was cleaning up after Sam. I thought that was a nice little touch. That's why Spock came over, because Sam left his drink on the table. He's like, oh, for God's sake, this guy again. So I thought that was funny. But
by the way, every time they show Sam, I can't help but think of Sam Rockwell, because his name is Sam.
Yeah.
He was also, of course, in Galaxy Quest.
Yes,
I can't get that out of my head. I'm like, oh, that's Sam Rockwell, but it ain't.
Oh, everybody says that. They definitely see that connection there.
Totally works. And speaking of Sam, Sam in season 1 almost seemed like a little bit of stunt casting inclusion. Not the actor, obviously, but just, it's Sam Kirk. But he was kind of an afterthought, and they barely used him. Maybe in 2 episodes of season 1, he had some lines, and then would do something dumb. I didn't quite expect them to kind of fix or bolster the character, and what I mean by fix or bolster, I didn't necessarily think they were going to add depth to him going forward, and so I didn't expect all the stuff that happened this episode with Sam and Kirk, not just with them talking, but what they were talking about, and Sam's animosity. I also didn't expect, because Sam is generally just kind of like a happy-go-lucky, one-dimensional character usually in Strange New Worlds, and I thought, whoa, this guy is moving up in the cast all of a sudden, and I appreciated that. It was kind of weird, though, how much animosity he did have. And, of course, they mentioned their father, and they kind of evoke images in a fan's mind of thinking about, oh, my gosh, the actor who plays Thor.
Worth.
Yes, Chris Hemsworth in the 2009 movie. When they started talking about their father, I'm picturing Chris Hemsworth in his silver onesie. So that was interesting. And I almost need to create a new segment for this podcast, I don't know, Shipper's Galley or something. Because I don't know that any Star Trek series before has ever turned me into such a shipper in general of the series in question. So being quite the shipper now, especially in season 2 of Strange New Worlds, because of what was set up with La'an and Alt Kirk and Tomorrow Squared, I have been waiting for these two to reconnect beyond a quick subspace message. And as I was watching the episode, I was like, where's La'an? Where's La'an? Where's La'an? I didn't write it down, but she doesn't show up into the episode until 30 minutes in. And I was like, what the heck? And then I was surprised that they talked a little bit, but hardly at all. And I feel like they did this on purpose to subvert my expectations, because I was expecting them to continue to flesh out what was established in that subspace message. But no, they are leaving me still wanting for more interaction / resolution. Yeah, they're doing it on purpose.
All right. So when I said missed opportunities with this episode, it is because we have been conscientious and recorded our podcasts, one right after the other, in appropriate order, consistent with the program, that this makes total sense. I mean, it's not like we recorded our podcast out of order from watching the television series and leapfrog things where this would be a confusing issue. You see, because we've been conscientious, we recognize that episode 6 follows episode 5, which left off with Chapel and Spock's special moment for the first time.
Right.
And so after that, leading into episode 6, as fans, we are anxious, we're enthusiastic to see what has happened between the two of them, or what's going on between the two of them. It just happened in episode 5. And so leading into episode 6, we're thinking, all right, we're going to see the emotional aftermath of what is going on between Spock and Chapel. If you want any kind of arc, it literally just happened. And so now, this being episode 6, finally we're going to see what an emotional relationship between Spock and Chapel is like. Here we go. And we get like 45 seconds over chess, and they're already trying to tank the relationship.
Yes!
They're going. So when I say that I feel shortchanged emotionally, we got Chapel and Spock unrequited and not spending the emotional investment on that. We have got La'an and Kirk bouncing around, not spending the emotional impact on that. But we have a long discussion about cookies and the history of this. This is what I'm talking about. There's so many missed opportunities. I understand, apparently, there were certain check boxes that they had to make for this episode. The stuff that they were trying to do. Okay. But I really think that they missed out on some really powerful, genuine emotional moments that we could have had in this episode between characters that we were really very excited about. And they went a different direction. So,
all right. Any last points anyone wants to bring up before we rate it? Okay, I guess not. Does anyone have a unit of measure?
You want to do Saurian Brandies?
Oh yeah, sure. Saurian Brandy. Oh, one other little point I'll bring up, because I can't now not notice these things. They are really getting their money's worth with their version of the volume, or I guess the volume is like a proprietary term by Disney Lucas. Mm-hmm. So it's referred to as like the LCD wall or something, like when you watch like Star Trek behind the scenes stuff. Mm-hmm. But anyway, they're getting their money's worth, because like that station whatever thing. Yeah. They just basically have 2 consoles in there, where the actors are actually standing, and they're taking that fourth wall effect, like from Wizard of Oz. They're taking it to the nth degree, and it's not just in this episode, but especially in this episode as well. I just think, yeah, sure, why not? But I'm so keyed into the effect now that it will always look like an effect. They're not ever going to dupe me into thinking. Well, of course, there's no hanger that big, but you know what I mean.
All right, yeah. Well, look, considering where we've come from in terms of special effects, I'm very happy that is what we're working with now. Even though we know it's an effect, it is better than what we have dealt with in the past with sci-fi. So that's all right.
Certainly. Mm-hmm. However, it's almost becoming a little bit Marvel MCU, where they're almost starting to use it so much that it'd be nice if they mix up the effect in some other kind of way. And I don't ask me what that is. It's just I'll bring this up in future episodes again.
One other thing, again, when I was talking about stuff that doesn't make sense, I got to bring this up. I mean, because I think this is kind of an issue here. So we realize that our crew member has been sabotaging the station. And then finally, Uhura comes to the understanding the aliens had been talking to her. And she runs up on the bridge. And she's talking to the captain. Now, again, I'm with you when I say that, Pike seems to be allowing a lot of leeway in terms of stuff that is going on his bridge, and in particular things that can directly affect his command. But I just want to point out that there are 3 crews, 3 Federation crews aboard this scrub station, this fueling station. No one knows how to shut it off. All right, three crews, including Apelia and Una, who are supposed to be Starfleet's top. No one can turn it off. And so, in the time it takes to completely evacuate everybody from the station, the easier solution is to hit it with photon torpedoes instead of finding some way to turn trillion-dollar Latinum whatever station that's necessary as an outpost for fueling fueling vehicles. On the word of Uhura, by itself, 3 crews aboard. The only way they can turn it off is by hitting it with photon torpedoes. I had a problem with that. I mean, there's some issues. Like you said, Pike is just supposed to be all right, but Uhura is hearing voices.
Well,
so I'm going to let her fire the photon torpedoes and blow up this whole station purely on that. I'm not going to just take a moment and just, why don't we give a moment to see if our 3 crews aboard the station are capable of just turning it off. Maybe if we just give it a moment, we could do that. No, there was some urgency.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And I was thinking that thing is so immensely huge when you see how big it is compared to starships. Like, it's like the size of the Death Star or something.
Like B5? Yeah.
And they say it's been years in the making in universe. And they just blow that thing up. I thought that was pretty wild. But I think it was for the spectacle and I guess they did it to make it that much more impactful how much trust and faith Pike is putting in Uhura.
And not only that, but he says to her, if this comes back, it'll be my fault.
Yeah, because he's such the perfect patriarchal figure.
Well, that may pay off later on. We'll see.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I got another final note. Those red things.
I just remembered, by the way. I wanted to rate it. How many out of 5 wholesome homemade cookies would you give it?
Okay. I had a feeling it was going to be cookie related. Wholesome homemade cookies. Homemade cookies.
They're not from the replicators.
Right. Or they called them something else, the food synthesizers. I think because replicators weren't invented, I don't think, until after TOS.
Or non-synthesized cookies, then, if you want.
No. It's all good. Another thing from the technical manual, those red dome things at the tip of nacelles, like on the classic Enterprise. Deep fans know those are called
Bussard collectors.
Yeah, Bussard collectors or the Bussard ram scoops. This is one of the rare instances in Star Trek where we actually see them used for what they were designed to do. Because they do show them in other episodes, but they use them for other things. They were, from the technical manual point of view, they were designed to intake this, what was it, deuterium? Yes. So this is exactly what they're made to do. So this is a rare time to actually see that in action. But anyway, let's rate this.
Oh, one.
Okay, go ahead.
Just want to throw this in here. You might know, I told you this was an episode where they did a lot of grief. There was a lot of grief they were covering in this episode. In the real world, the character Ortegas, she lost her significant other. Yes. Just before I think she got her role, or she.
It was. Oh my gosh, she lost him just before season 1 was going to premiere.
Oh, okay. So yeah, he didn't get a chance to see it. But to honor her significant other, they named the gas giant, the gaseous expanse, the nebula, after them. So Bannon is not, is a reference to who she lost.
Oh,
yes, it's Bannon's nebula. And I want to say something more. I'm so glad you brought this up, because I wrote it in my notes and I forgot to bring this up, as you did, Carl. But Inside Baseball, we're recording this some weeks after the episode is aired.
What?
And I just watched the current Ready Room. And by the way, the last 3 Ready Rooms have been really good, if you've never watched that show with Will Wheaton. But anyway, I was watching the current one that just came out literally today. And Will Wheaton is having a discussion with the actress who plays Ortegas. And it is rough because she does start crying during the interview. God, I feel like I'm going to make myself start crying now. And as Carl said, the nebula was named as a tribute to her significant other who she lost. And not only that, but the actress, oh my God, I don't have her name written right here, Melissa Nava. She said that throughout the entire filming of season 2, like between takes even sometimes, she would be in and out of crying the whole 10 episodes of filming. That she would like leave set, go to her trailer, yada, 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 then put on her game face and then, act. So it was like listening to her explain this. I was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Holy smokes.
It's too bad.
Well, fortunately for her, she's not in it that often. But I'm sure they had to film whatever after that, and she'd have to, No, that almost makes me think that maybe they filmed around her because they knew. But if she was really, really good at hiding her sad face, then
yeah, it was wild. It was wild.
Some strange stuff, wild stuff.
Okay, finally, out of 5 homemade or wholesome homemade cookies, I'll go ahead and rate it. I'm going to give it a 3.5. Carl was real close to talking me down to a 3. But at the end of the day, I still fell for the interactions for the most part between Kirk and Uhura. And for some reason, I loved how Kirk was, really putting himself out, like just to help her. And there's something else I forgot to mention, but, when they first meet it's actually called the Port Galley. A lot of people are mixing up the Port Galley and the Forward Lounge. They're 2 different places. But anyway, they're in the Port Galley when they first meet. And, and one of the first things Uhura says is like, I'm in the mood to get hit on right now, which of course fits with how we know the Kirk character. But it also made me, in my mind, compare and contrast this Kirk and this Uhura and the Kelvin timeline, Chris Pine and Zoe Saldana, and how their dynamic is. And I almost thought it was almost not just an in-joke to classic Kirk, but an in-joke to how Chris Pine's Kirk is in the movies with Uhura. But I loved how he was just putting himself out there and he wasn't trying to get with her or anything like that. He was just trying to be like a helpful / mentor figure. So those scenes still work for me. That gives me that half point to get to 3.5. All
right. May I go next, I guess?
Absolutely.
Because I think we're all waiting for what Carl has to say. I'm going to give it a 3. You know what? I think you both have some valid points. And I think maybe Carl has knocked it down from 3.5 to 3 for me. Because if I go back, I'm not going to remember this like I will the one before it or those after it, especially the one after it. But it still didn't suck so bad for me that I just was, throwing my shoes at the TV or something like that. So, yeah, it's all right. It's all right. It's better, okay. Better than just okay. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. 3. All right, Sean. Well, frankly, it was the dialogue with you two that brought my score up to the 3.5 that I'm going.
What?
Whoa.
What?
Yep.
I was not expecting 3 or above from you.
I was hanging around 3, but the wide-eyed optimist of Sean talking about what he saw in the episode, and you, Eric, describing the characters that we love being a buttress for a lot of stuff. I will go 3.5 cookies and try not to be too crotchety as an old man. But that is
what I was not expecting that. But let me reiterate a point I brought up earlier again. Just like, don't y'all agree, or you don't have to agree, that did this not at the very least feel like Formula Trek? And I don't mean that as a as a oh my god, as a pejorative or bad thing, because even if something's just like what do you call it, run of the mill Star Trek, like that still has a place as comfort food for me, no matter what series it is. So I actually found comfort in the fact that, hey, you know what? It just feels like a regular old throwaway Star Trek episode, but I eat up throwaway Star Trek episodes.
It does. It does sound like I did feel like a traditional Star Trek episode, but yeah,
because they're not all the greatest thing ever.
Well, my only counter to that is back in the day we had more to work with. They got fewer episodes. I don't want to see them fudging it the way that they used to when we had so many episodes.
Okay. I'll give you that.
You're absolutely correct. That at no point did this not feel like Star Trek. Whatever my opinions are of it, it definitely felt like a Star Trek episode. It was in universe in every way. So I'll give you that.
I just seem to think that, and I think Eric brought this up early on, is that the whole possession thing of somebody, at least one person on board being possessed by some sort of space alien, and then they have to resolve that. I feel like I've seen that like 5 times.
Yes.
In Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Hell yeah, and probably in Voyager too. I would expect.
Yeah, like it impregnates Deanna Troi, or it makes Data human, or it's turning everybody into chimpanzees or reptile people.
Oh yeah,
they're de-evolving.
Yeah, the one where Beverly's the only one who realizes that she's in Groundhog Day, and there's like the spherical thing shrinking around the ship.
Oh, and people are missing one bite. I kind of liked it. I thought that was pretty cool.
It was cool.
That's a topic for another day.
Oh, absolutely.
Next gen episode where the aliens are sticking probes in people's brains, but they're invisible. It's all of these. It's all of these that we've seen. It's why it feels familiar. So, yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Well, closing out the show today, this is Eric.
This is Carl.
And this is the Wide-Eyed Optimist.
Until next time.
Always remember to transport 3.
Beware Romulans bearing gifts.
Hello and welcome back to the surprise bonus section, this time doing Lost in Translation. And as I mentioned in the previous ones, this is Caleb. And like I've said in all these bonus sections, I'm just doing this to save from having to fill up some space in the feed with one of those catching up episodes. So instead of doing that all in one big chunk, I'm doing it at the end of these as a little bonus. So this time we get an Uhura-focused episode with a few little tendrils of other characters tied in. I'll say maybe the first 15, 20 minutes or so, I started to be like, I feel like this is Uhura-focused, but we keep getting all these little bits that feel a little bit like they're, like it was getting a little bit busy, like there's a little bit too much going on. We get Paul Wesley back as Kirk, which is nice. This time actually seeing the real Kirk for an episode. We saw just a little bit of him. Now we get a full episode with him. And we get some awkward dynamics with him and Sam. Sam, he comes off as a little bit of a jerk in this. So some of their scenes were fun. But mainly his contribution to this episode is being kind of the assistant character to Uhura. And a lot of that stuff I feel was quite well handled. We start with him kind of half hitting on her, not fully, but she kind of takes it as if he is, probably knowing his reputation. But very quickly, he is the first one to realize that something bigger is happening with her. It's not just in her head, because in this episode it starts out with her having some issues with some hallucination stuff. I won't go into the plot too much. I'm sure they've already well discussed that. But I like the fact that he can see something more in her and is willing to listen. I think that's one of the things about Kirk that I always like in the original series, is he isn't someone who's, an inside-the-box thinker. He likes to look at things from all angles and take a step back instead of just kind of, just going whatever seems like the issue is on the surface. That's one of the strong suits of Kirk. So that's another thing they keep consistent here. Uhura, we haven't had too many episodes that were focused on her. I think we just had one in that first season. And so I don't mind getting another look at her here. I did have some minor logic issues with this. Again, I'm sure they've gone through many of these issues. But for instance, they end up finding another crew member who's having a similar issue with her, having these hallucinations, hearing these weird sounds. And he's going off violently. He's attacking people. And Pike and a couple security officers and Kirk go after him. But for whatever reason, Kirk brings her along with him, even though she's suffering similar symptoms. One of their first interactions, she attacked him. So it was like, okay, maybe you don't want to have this liability here with you. And she's even walking around with a phaser. That just seemed like it didn't fully make sense. And then even her, she decides, okay, I need to go back, like I'm not doing well. Kirk lets her go off on her own. And she even ends up finding this other crewman. And she decides to confront him on her own. All that stuff was a bit head-scratching, just in terms of the liability of this character, and maybe you don't want her walking around with a gun when she's already attacked Kirk. But overall, I like the premise for this one. I think it's another bit of classic Star Trek coming in. I always like the element of aliens being expressed not just in the typical humanoid form, but as these kind of gaseous beings that can just survive in the vacuum of space. I always like those kind of aliens, so it's nice to see that return again. I don't have too much to say about this one. Overall, I'm mostly positive. There was one major aspect of it that they kept returning to that never really hit for me. So, as again, I'm sure they mentioned in the episode, the crew's here working on this installation for this kind of gas station in space. And working on the gas station, trying to get it up and running, is Pelia and Una. And throughout the whole episode, they sprinkle in a few, like maybe 30-second chunks here or there. And the two of them are just not getting along, and Pelia is trying to get to the bottom of, or at least trying to get Una to realize why she doesn't like her. I'm not fully warmed up to Pelia yet, and for Una, this feels like really light lifting. Like it never really feels like, at least for me, I don't really care about this dynamic, and so them exploring it like this, it's really just kind of a screen filler for an A-plot, B-plot dynamic. They tie them because both Uhura's hallucinations and Una's trepidations with Pelia are both tied to their connection with Hemmer. And we even see Hemmer in this. We get some little cameos in this hallucination form and in this video that Uhura's watching. So it's nice that they can tie it together like that, but I just don't really feel like that dynamic takes off well, and I just find that whole aspect of the episode forgettable. But I do like that because Kirk is back again, we get a couple chances for La'an to reconnect with him. I think those scenes play really well. I'm really glad that they were able to pick up on that so quickly. We don't get it too much here. I wish we could have got a little bit more, but for what we do get, I think all that stuff works. And just overall, I'm warming up to Paul Wesley's Kirk more and more. It still doesn't feel anything like the Shatner Kirk, but more and more I'm starting to like it. I will say, I did find the climax of this a little bit quick, for instance, because the ultimate climax is they have to destroy this gas station they're building in space, this big installation that Starfleet's brought these two ships together, Kirk's ship and, of course, the Enterprise. They're to work together to get this installation completed. And at the end of the day, Pike has to make the ultimate decision to just blow it up. And he even kind of, he looks hesitant. He's like, are you sure this is what we got to do? And at the end of the episode, he's like, okay, set me up for a call with some Starfleet superiors to discuss what I just did. So I thought that was kind of funny, and I thought that maybe it was also a little bit too quick. Like, I get that it was very, it had to be done right away. But you would think that he's going to be in the hot seat for a good while after the amount of money that they spent in this project. But I guess coming around to the end, I don't want to spend too much on this, and I really don't have that much to say. This episode for me was just okay. I appreciate another chance to see Paul Wesley as Kirk. Like I said, I'm warming up to him more and more. I appreciate the chance for her to get another spotlight. And I'm going to rate this thing out of chess pieces on a 3-dimensional chessboard. And I'm going to give it just a straight down the line 3. Totally passable, but for Strange New Worlds, I feel like they've set a pretty high bar. In this episode, he's just kind of sitting there, hovering around the bar, not going over it, not really dipping under it too much, but not really impressing all that much either. But still, very much enjoying this season. Excited to see what we're going to get next. And hope you join us. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.